What if Mark Grayson had never known a mother's love? What if he was raised not as a son, but as a weapon? Today we explore one of the darkest variants of Invincible, a version where tragedy shaped a monster.
It's okay.
Mr. Invincible. In an alternate universe, everything started the same. Nolan Grayson, the Viltrumite agent, came to Earth and found something unexpected. Love. He formed a family with Debbie, and they dreamed of bringing new life into the world. But fate had other plans. The Viltrumite War came early in this timeline. Nolan was called away before his son's birth, leaving Debbie alone and pregnant under the protection of the Global Defense Agency. In their sterile laboratories, tragedy struck. The infant Mark, unable to control his immense Viltrumite strength, burst through his mother's womb at birth. Debbie bled to death, leaving the world with an orphaned baby of incalculable power. Cecil Stedman initially wanted to do the right thing, find Mark a loving family. But the Pentagon saw something else, the ultimate military asset. Mark grew up in underground laboratories, surrounded by cameras, scientists, and armed soldiers. He was fed, clothed, and trained, but never embraced. Without love or genuine human connection, Mark learned that his worth resided only in his power. Every mistake was punished with isolation and severity. He became something worse than a project. He became Mr. Invincible. When Mark came of age, he was presented to the world as a new hero, joining the Guardians of the Globe. At first, he seemed to fit in, fighting alongside Adam Eve, Rexplode, and others. But the emotional damage began to show. He saw his teammates not as allies, but as obstacles, slow, weak, and inefficient. After several missions where he disobeyed orders and used unnecessary lethal force, tensions exploded. A brutal confrontation with Robot marked the breaking point. Mark publicly humiliated Robot, making it clear he wouldn't be controlled. Disillusioned and furious, Mr. Invincible abandoned both the Guardians and the GDA. He began dispensing justice his way, executing villains without trial, punishing minor criminals disproportionately, and eliminating heroes he deemed too weak. The public, fed by propaganda campaigns, still saw him as a savior, but those who truly knew him understood the truth. Mr. Invincible wasn't a protector, he was a rising tyrant, a man without empathy who saw the world as his property. Years later, a Viltrumite agent arrived on Earth for evaluation. After a brutal battle, Mr. Invincible emerged victorious, but not without cost. The dying Viltrumite's warning echoed, "Another will come, stronger than me." For the first time, Mr. Invincible understood he wasn't truly invincible. He demanded the most advanced training humanity could provide, pushing his body and mind to their limits. Then the day came. Nolan arrived as Omni-Man. Father and son faced each other in silence, then launched into combat. It was brutal, devastating, and poetic, because no matter the universe, this battle between father and son always occurred. And so ends the story of Mr. Invincible, a version of Mark Grayson who never knew parental love, who was raised as an experiment rather than a child, who sought to fill his void with power, fame, and fear, and was ultimately consumed by the very traumas that made him strong. Old man Mark. Like in the original timeline, Mark managed to defeat Angstrom Levy in that completely desolate dimension. The air was heavy, the ground sandy, with no signs of life anywhere. But as Mark delivered his final blows, Levy opened a portal behind him and pushed Mark away with one last strike. Mark lunged toward the closing portal, but it was too late. The gateway sealed, and with it, all hope of escape vanished. Mark was completely alone on a dead planet, no life, no resources, no way out. On the other side, Angstrom Levy, gravely injured but alive, healed quickly with his technology. His decision was calculated and cold. The main universe was his target. Leaving Mark trapped in that desolate dimension was the safest option, an endless prison of silence and despair. With methodical precision, Levy began his reign of terror in the main universe. One by one, he eliminated the Guardians of the Globe, Adam Eve, Rexplode, Robot, even the Immortal. None could stop him, but it didn't end there. Mark's mother Debbie and his younger brother Oliver also died under his merciless hand. Trapped and alone, Mark began wandering the dead planet. The vast, desolate landscape became his entire world. Unable to overcome the dread consuming him, he became a nomad, endlessly traversing the same ruins and deserts in a cycle without end. Eternal silence was his only companion. The sound of his own footsteps was all he could hear in that vast emptiness. The lack of stimuli, of living beings, of anything that could remind him of his humanity, drove him to the edge of madness. Delusions began consuming him. In the dark nights, in the stillness of desolation, Mark saw visions of his past life, the Guardians, Eve, his mother, his brother, and most painfully, his father, Nolan. But none of it was real, just distorted reflections of what once was. His memories blurred, his power diminished. Without the ability to fly, Mark could only walk, crawling through the same arid earth without purpose, searching for something to pull him from this endless nightmare. Despite his considerably longer life expectancy than a common human, Mark's age didn't surpass the hundreds of years a normal Viltrumite might expect. However, his appearance was that of a much older man, nearly 60 years, reflecting the physical and emotional wear he'd endured. His long, gray hair fell disheveled to his waist, while his white beard gave him an unkempt appearance. He wore rags, remnants of what was once his hero suit, now torn and dirty reminders of what he'd lost. In his solitary existence, Mark had found one object that kept him anchored to his humanity, a stone he called Eve. He carried it always, often speaking to it softly, seeking comfort in its false companionship. He would ask the stone how his home was doing, if Earth still existed, if his friends were still alive. But there was never an answer, only the echo of his own voice reverberating in the vast emptiness of that planet. Countless hundreds of years passed. Mark continued walking the same arid lands, talking to a stone named Eve, dreaming of friends who no longer existed, of a family that would never return. One morning, under the burning sun of that desert world, Mark Grayson simply fell to his knees, holding the stone to his chest. With an almost imperceptible whisper, he asked forgiveness from all those he had failed. Then he closed his eyes and, for the first time in centuries, found peace. His body lay on the cracked earth while the wind swept away the last trace of his existence. Without glory, without funeral, without witnesses, thus ended the story of Invincible in this universe. Superior Mark. After Invincible's brutal defeat at Omni-Man's hands, Earth fell silent. The Global Defense Agency and Robot arrived too late, finding only remnants of an uneven battle, shreds of costume, bloodstains, and scattered teeth as proof of the tragedy. But for Robot, it was enough. Using DNA samples and the help of the Mauler twins, he initiated his most ambitious project, creating an organic human body to house his consciousness. Not just anybody, but a replica of the young man who had inspired him, Mark Grayson. The transfer was successful. Robot's mind, a synthetic intelligence built with millimetric precision, now inhabited flesh and bone. For the first time, he felt the world's heat on his skin, the irregular rhythm of a heartbeat, and the weight of what he'd done. But what he found wasn't liberation, it was confusion. The body didn't respond as expected. Each step was a new experience, each emotion uncharted territory. He was human, but he didn't understand it. Worse, this body wasn't his, it was a reconstruction of the hero who had tried to save the world. Robot couldn't ignore the truth. He had taken something sacred without permission. So he made a decision. He renounced the name Robot and adopted a new one, Marcus. Not as a copy or superficial homage, but as a way to keep alive the memory of one who was no longer there. The only person Marcus would confess the truth to was Amanda. Looking into her eyes for the first time from his new body, no longer as artificial intelligence, but as a young man with flesh, skin, and a trembling voice, she understood. "I don't care that you used his DNA," she said, "but if there's a chance, just one, that Mark is still alive out there, please find him." Moved by that hope, Marcus locked himself in his laboratory for weeks, designing a completely new device, a synthetic scanner using Mark's DNA to search entire regions of deep space. He activated it each night looking at the stars while his algorithms searched for any signal in the void. But while waiting for answers, something changed within him. His body began reacting differently, his vision improved, his endurance increased, gravity stopped weighing him down, and then came flight. The Viltrumite heritage sleeping in his blood awakened without warning. Marcus began falling in love with himself, with the freedom his new body offered, with youth, energy, and power. But with that transformation came fear. He started lying to Amanda, telling her the project still wasn't working, that he still couldn't fly. He feared that if anyone discovered what was happening, if Amanda learned that the body he'd created was blossoming into a new Viltrumite, no one would ever forgive him. 7 long years passed since Mark Grayson's disappearance. During that time, Marcus aged physically until reaching the same age Mark had been when defeated by his father. But it wasn't just his body maturing. His brilliant mind dedicated itself to understanding every secret of his physiology. Marcus studied his body at the molecular and genetic levels, not to surrender to that blood or glorify it, but to control it, master it, and become the protector Mark couldn't be. Then one day, he found it, a DNA pattern floating in a remote region of space. It was weak, fragmented, but unmistakable. Marcus sent a long-range search drone with a single mission: find Mark Grayson. But Earth wouldn't wait. In those 7 years, the world became crueler. The most devastating tragedy came from Dinosaurus, who detonated multiple bombs at the planet's poles, causing catastrophic sea level rise. Entire cities disappeared beneath the waves. Marcus still secretly faced Dinosaurus for the first time and was humiliated. He barely survived with broken lungs and shattered morale. Using his old robot alias, he returned to public life, designing an artificial moon capable of regulating sea levels, humanity's symbol of hope. But for Marcus, it was much more. In the depths of that artificial moon, he built his sanctuary, a secret place where he could train, experiment, and evolve with one objective: become as strong as Mark, or even stronger. Finally, Marcus received the signal that his space drone was heading to Earth, captured by a massive spacecraft, the Viltrumite Empire. Though Marcus possessed considerable power, he knew he had no chance of facing an entire empire alone. So he made a risky decision: impersonate the original Mark. His appearance caused profound impact on Cecil and all the Guardians. With great conviction, Marcus fabricated a detailed story about being rescued by rebel Viltrumites. The war for Earth began. Thrag, enraged and exhausted by years of human resistance, no longer wished to conquer the planet, only destroy it. With his red cape fluttering in stellar wind, he descended with fury, accompanied by 50 Viltrumites and vast alien armies. But Marcus was prepared. From the atmosphere, millions of black drones with Invincible's golden insignia filled the sky. The combat was chaotic, brutal, without quarter. In orbit above Earth, among the collapsed lunar station and floating debris, Marcus launched himself against Thrag. The battle was devastating. Each impact shook mountains. Each clash created sonic waves that tore the sky. And in that cosmic dance of violence, Marcus proved he had become something more than a copy. He had become superior Mark. 500 years later, Earth had been reborn. Gigantic orbital rings surrounded it, connected to space stations and suspended cities. The planet had become a Type 2 civilization, having conquered their star's energy. In a massive floating plaza above the Sea of Tranquility, millions gathered before the Temple of Unity. Marcus stood there, wearing a white cape with golden details and the redesigned Viltrumite symbol on his chest. Beside him, Dinosaurus looked out at the crowd, dozens of Viltrumites. Not hundreds yet, but they would be. Not warriors, but citizens, teachers, scientists, farmers, families. 5 centuries ago, this world was on the brink of extinction. Marcus's voice was clear, firm, honest. Wars, betrayals, blood, destruction. We lost everything, but we also found something: hope. He turned to the sky, where the fused symbol of Earth and Viltrum appeared on screens. Today, humanity and Viltrum are one. The plaza erupted in applause, cheers, tears, and thus concludes the story of Superior Mark, born trapped in a capsule, deprived of everything, who ended up transforming the Viltrumites, saving humanity, and becoming emperor of a new era. Not through his strength, but through his wisdom. Battle Mark. From a very young age, this version of Mark Grayson was much more violent and stubborn compared to the Mark we know. His temperament generated constant conflicts with his father Nolan, who, in this reality, had a stronger connection to humanity than his canonical counterpart. To channel his anger, Mark began training in different martial arts during his childhood. While Nolan saw with interest how his son developed an attitude more appropriate to an authentic Viltrumite, he also worried that this behavior would end up turning against him. The story would follow its normal course, Mark awakening his powers, joining the team, Nolan murdering the Guardians, until his destiny changed completely the day he crossed paths with Battle Beast. During their first encounter, Mark managed to offer a worthy fight that surprised Battle Beast to the point where he proposed training him on his home planet. He believed Mark had the potential to become the rival he had sought all his life. However, Nolan immediately opposed. He couldn't allow his son to leave with someone like Battle Beast. In an attempt to make him see reason, he revealed the truth about the Viltrumites at that very moment. But Mark didn't care about Viltrum's conquest or his race's supremacy. He only wanted to become the warrior he was destined to be. What began as an argument soon became combat. Mark, blinded by years of accumulated anger, unleashed all his fury against his own father. Nolan's defeat was inevitable. His own son surpassed him, defeated him, and killed him. After committing this irreparable act, Mark left Earth without looking back, departing alongside Battle Beast to begin his true training. On Battle Beast's planet, Mark's training began in the worst possible way, with a brutal beating almost every day. Each blow, each fracture, each wound served to make him something stronger. Within months, his brutality, strength, and resistance grew at an alarming rate, to the point where their combats ended, leaving planets in ruins. The coalition of planets didn't take long to notice this rising threat. Fearing this new Viltrumite would become too powerful, they took drastic measures. They deployed an experimental strain of the Scourge virus, hoping to eliminate him, but they failed. The virus, designed to exterminate pure Viltrumites, was unable to kill Mark. His human DNA made him immune, rendering the attack completely useless. When he finally recovered, his destiny and Battle Beasts reached their final outcome. Both faced each other in one last battle, the fiercest of all. When the fight ended, Mark emerged as the victor. But the victory wasn't his alone. Battle Beast, with his last breath, smiled. He had found the worthy opponent he always sought. As his final wish, he asked Mark to devour his heart. Without hesitation, Mark fulfilled his request, and with it, inherited his curse. After his victory, Mark decided to honor his mentor's legacy. He designed an outfit inspired in Battle Beasts, and as the definitive tribute, transformed his skin into a cape, ensuring he would always carry a part of him. But Mark, the young hero of Earth, had died along with his humanity. He adopted a new identity, a new name. From that moment, the universe would know him as Unstoppable. With this new purpose, Unstoppable traveled the galaxy, seeking worthy opponents, devastating everything in his path. His strength was absolute, his will unbreakable. It was then he discovered the truth. The Coalition of Planets, the same organization that had fought Viltrumite expansion for years, was responsible for launching the experimental Scourge virus strain against him. The Coalition feared what Mark was becoming. His rise was too dangerous, and if the virus had worked, they would have eliminated the most lethal Viltrumite that ever existed. But they had failed, and Mark couldn't leave this unpunished. With uncontrollable fury, he brought war to the Coalition of Planets. His attack was devastating. Entire worlds fell one after another. Their armies were destroyed without mercy. There was no truce, no negotiations. One by one, the Coalition's leaders were annihilated, including Thaddeus, the traitor Viltrumite who had conspired against the Empire for centuries. Thaddeus fought to the end, but not even his experience could save him. Mark destroyed him with his own hands, unknowingly avenging the death of his grandfather Argal, the ancient Viltrumite emperor. Among the Coalition's great enemies was Alan the Alien. Alan had been a symbol of resistance. His power, determination, and unbreakable spirit had made him a leader for the Coalition. But before Unstoppable, all that meant nothing. The battle was short. Alan fought with all his strength, but Mark was superior. He destroyed him without hesitation, without showing compassion. With his fall, the Coalition of Planets ceased to exist. Mark remembered his heritage. If he truly was the ultimate warrior, he had to claim the place that belonged to him. No one was stronger than him, no one could challenge him. It was time to take the Viltrumite throne. But to do so, he first had to face the current emperor, Thrag. The battle between them was brutal. Thrag, with centuries of combat experience, didn't fall easily. Each blow of their confrontation shook Viltrum's atmosphere. Each clash of fists made the surface tremble. Thrag fought with everything he had, with the fury and pride of someone who had reigned for centuries. But Mark wasn't a common enemy. His training with Battle Beast, his unbreakable will, and his evolution as a warrior had taken him beyond any Viltrumite in history. After a fierce and heartbreaking battle, Mark managed to prevail, leaving Thrag's body destroyed and lifeless. However, his victory didn't mean the Viltrumites would accept him as their leader. For them, Mark was still a hybrid. No matter how strong he was, his human lineage made him impure in the elite's eyes. It was then they discovered the truth. Mark wasn't just a hybrid, he wasn't a simple bastard with Viltrumite blood. He was the direct descendant of Argol, the ancient emperor, the maximum figure in Viltrumite history. He who ruled before Thrag and whose death marked the beginning of an era of decadence for the race. Mark wasn't an imposter, he was their legitimate heir. The revelation changed everything. One by one, the Viltrumites knelt. His lineage was sacred. Moreover, he had proven in combat that no other could equal him. There were no more doubts, no more resistance. Mark Grayson, now known as Unstoppable, was the new Emperor of Viltrum. But Mark still had one last bond to break. To erase all trace of his humanity, he destroyed Earth, annihilating every living being on it. Years passed. The entire universe learned to fear his name. Over time, he became a dark legend, the definitive Viltrumite, the invincible beast, son of Battle Beast, Earth's last breath, devourer of planets. But there was one title he enjoyed more than all the others, Unstoppable. And so ends the tale of Battle Mark, a warrior who chose strength over love, conquest over compassion, and in doing so, became the very thing the universe learned to fear. Not a hero fallen from grace, but a force of nature that remade itself in the image of pure, unyielding power. Blight Mark, he doesn't come from our world, doesn't even belong to our reality. Blight Mark was born in the black cracks of a forgotten multiverse, where the laws of life and death are barely distant whispers from a universe that no longer breathes. A place where suffering is the only language, and existing is an endless condemnation. He once had a name, a face, an identity. But all of that faded into the fragmented ether of his world, crushed by the cruel hands of his creators. Ancient, hungry entities that feed on screams, sorrows, and the broken will of those who try to resist their imposed mold. Blight Mark isn't alive or dead, but trapped in an intermediate state, like a wound that never closes, like a shadow that refuses to fade. He drifts between dimensions, dragging his condemnation through worlds that don't remember him, wrapped in a disturbingly familiar mask, the face of Shitty Mark. Perhaps it's a desperate attempt to cling to a humanity he no longer possesses, or a cruel irony that laughs at the reflection of what he lost. The mask isn't a choice, it's a scar. And under that mask, there's no redemption, no soul, no peace. Only the echo of pain, so ancient it has forgotten its name. His eyes don't see, they devour. His voice doesn't speak, it corrupts. His mere presence softly tears reality's fabric, as if the universe itself were trying to pull away from him. What lies beneath the mask isn't a face, it's nothing. Not an expression, not an identity, just a surface polished, like marble, from a forgotten tomb, as if it had been erased by the same hand that created him, or punished by a universe that refused to let him be someone. His eyes don't exist like ours. They're cracks in reality, deep wells without bottom or light. Abysses where time breaks, and by looking at them, you don't see, you fall. A frozen needle of anguish pierces mercilessly into the soul's depths, taking something with you when you try to look away. Each visual encounter is a sentence. He doesn't need to touch you to undo you. His gaze alone strips away names, memories, will. And in that unfathomable silence, he leaves behind his torment, filters into your mind's corners, echoes of screams you can't place, memories you didn't live, pains you don't understand but feel as your own. In his original world, Blight Mark was a weapon. a vessel created to contain the uncontainable, a cursed witness to the atrocities of a broken universe where hope was flayed alive and pain became law. He wasn't conceived to have will, only to observe, absorb, suffer. Grotesque Mark. Grotesque Mark isn't from our world. He doesn't even belong to our reality. He was born in the black cracks of a forgotten multiverse, where the laws of life and death are merely distant whispers from a universe that no longer breathes. A place where suffering is the only language, and existing is an endless condemnation. He once had a name, a face, an identity, but all of that vanished in the fragmented ether of his crushed world. Ancient, hungry entities that feed on screams, sorrows, and the broken will of those who try to resist molded him into something unrecognizable. During his universe's final moments, when everything was falling apart in incomprehensible pieces, Mark reached toward the incomprehensible. There, he merged with a living entity known as Nalai Kor. From that instant, he stopped aging, healing, dying, or even belonging to a single reality. Nalai Kor isn't a common substance. It's a black, dense, living fluid from a universe where death won. No stars, no matter, no time, only empty echoes, and this conscious residue floating in absolute darkness. It doesn't have will, as we understand it, but it has purpose. Find pain, inhabit it, and feed on it. When Nalai Kor fused with Mark, it didn't heal him, it kept him standing even though his body was destroyed. It gave him a new form of life, one that no longer requires organs, stability, or sanity. It keeps him alive but doesn't let him heal. It doesn't allow him to die but doesn't grant him rest either. His flesh twists, his mind fluctuates between what he was and what he should never have been. His presence tears the multiverse like a scar that won't close. He doesn't fight for power, doesn't want to rule, seeks neither revenge nor glory nor redemption. He only wants everything to end, everything forever. Calling him evil would be a mistake, too human. Grotesque Mark is broken, not by physical pain, that's already part of him, but by the memory of what he was. Fragments still remain in his collapsed mind, flashes of his former life, of his humanity, of the faces he once loved and protected. He doesn't forget them, he remembers them with rage, and that memory consumes him. He doesn't kill for power, doesn't laugh, doesn't enjoy, doesn't impose his will. He kills because he sees what others cannot. For him, every variant in the multiverse is a repeating lie. Copies of himself trapped in cycles, doomed to fail, believing their decisions matter, that their story is unique, but he has already awakened. He knows, and knowing hurts. When he encounters other variants, he doesn't annihilate them immediately. Sometimes he observes them, sometimes he tries to speak. But inevitably, he destroys them because for him, the only way to break the cycle is to extinguish it, to end the illusions, finish the echo. He doesn't want to reign, doesn't want to be feared, he only wants everything to end. Grotesque Mark doesn't fight like a Viltrumite would. He doesn't need technique, speed, or strategy. His torn and mutated body responds to pain as if it were fuel. Each wound rebuilds him more brutally, more inhumanly. He doesn't heal, he transforms. Hitting him doesn't weaken him, it awakens him. His mere presence is an anomaly. Time seems to slip around him, repeating moments or erasing them without warning. Reality near him cracks as if his existence were an error the universe can't process. Memories alter, clocks fail, and the air seems charged with living static. The strongest minds tremble. Seeing him too long provokes visions, voices that don't exist, thoughts that aren't yours. It's as if the universe screams in silence to warn you that something is wrong. Too wrong. He can cross dimensions without portals, technology, or external energy. He doesn't travel, he erupts. The walls between realities break before him like old glass. With each arrival, he leaves behind a low hum and a scar in the multiversal fabric. Although his body seems to drag between life and putrefaction, he cannot die. Nalai Kor refuses to let him go. He has lost organs, parts of his face, even entire sections of his skeleton, but he always remains standing like a corpse animated by pain. His heart stopped beating years ago. He sees everything as false, calls other variants echoes in denial, shadows of what once was real. For him, the multiverse isn't a wonder, it's a mirage in ruins. He doesn't heal like normal Viltrumites. The more damage he receives, the more monstrous and powerful he becomes. You don't weaken him, you feed him. Each blow is an offering. Each attempt to destroy him is a step closer to his true form. Just seeing him for too long fragments the mind causes memory loss, confusion, hallucinations. Those who survive don't remember who they are, only that something is searching for them. Their thoughts dissolve like ink in water. In each dimension he steps on, a barely audible hum crawls through the edges of the world like the distant lament of a universe dying in slow motion. It's the sound of something that shouldn't exist, but insists on doing so. When he speaks, it's not his voice you hear, they're layers of echoes. Some scream, others plead, and a few whisper warnings like broken prayers. They're fragments of the marks he has erased, trapped within him, unable to leave. Time itself breaks near him. Frames skip as if reality were poorly rendered. Wounds appear before blows arrive. Words repeat echoes that were never spoken. Everything distorts, everything corrupts. And when he finally stops, when the hum ceases and the cracks calm, only one question hangs in the air, frozen and hollow. How long until he reaches the world of the original Mark? Grotesque Mark stands as the ultimate warning what happens when reality abandons its children and leaves them to evolve in the darkness. He is proof that not all survivors deserve to grow, and that sometimes the universe creates something so wrong that existence itself recoils in horror. Thanks for diving into these dark and epic fan-made variants of Invincible with us. We couldn't cover every twisted version of Mark Grayson out there, but don't worry, more coming in our next video. Drop a comment below with your favorite variant from today and let us know which one you want to see next. If you enjoyed this, smash that subscribe button, hit the bell, and join us for the next chapter of Invincible's Multiverse Madness.